Who alive can't put me in a box. I redefine any definition you got. I am the tiger, I'm making steps to the top. The flames, I rip it up, you just gotta hand me the rock. Take a seat, you cannot stand it. All I know, the flow harder than a Scotch bonnet. Don't try studying me, you cannot manage. This ain't what you want, bitch, I'm a fucking phenomenon. This ain't what you want, bitch, I'm a fucking phenomenon.
Hello, you guys. I hope everybody is well out there. I hope that you guys have lots of positive energy. I hope you guys are ready for this show. I am. So I had a series of really interesting events that happened over the past 24 to 48 hours. And I'm still here. I'm back here to talk about accountability. And I'm here to talk about issues in the Black community. And I'm here to talk about some of the issues that have been plaguing you, perhaps. One sec. Sorry about that. My wonderful producer is, had some feedback issues. So, so we're gonna get in that discussion today. And as you guys come in, don't forget to like and share the content. I am Dr. Jefferson, and I want to welcome you guys to Life Discussions with Dr. Jefferson and to this conversation. So let me see what's up for a discussion. I know I talked earlier about appearance. I talked a lot about appearance and kind of like I brushed around the conversation with Monique and Kevin Samuels. I kind of mentioned him and some other things about appearance and professionalism and things like that in the regard that we have for those components in the Black community. And not really just us. It's just this generation in general. So we're definitely going to brush up and we're going to talk a little bit to that conversation. But also I'm going to explore a host of issues around accountability and the issues that we have in our community. So I'm going to start with, what do you think is one of the primary issues? And I said one of the primary issues simply because I know that we all have different purviews. Hey, William, how are you? I know that we all have different perceptions of what kind of are the issues in our community and how those issues impact us.
Hello.
One sec. But I know that we all have a different, perception of how or what the issues are, and then also how those issues impact us. William, I know that you talk a tremendous amount on your platform, on your page on Facebook, about some of the issues that you notice from kind of where you sit, not only in our community, but in our political system and things like that. So go ahead, type in the chat. Let me know what issues you feel are some of the prevalent issues at the forefront of the Black community in progress for us. Of course, you guys know I have the difficult discussions, and my thing is always accountability. I feel like that's the biggest issue that we have. I feel like there are a lot of things happening in our community, but the underlying issue that seeds those things has a lot to do with a lack of accountability. So it is what it is. What's going on, Money Boy Trey? How are you? What's going on? So that's my question. What do you guys think is the primary issue? Let me see. I do feel like the lack of accountability leads to a lot of things. And that's just my perception. But I feel like oftentimes it has to do with accountability that parents take or refuse to take when it comes to how we decide to rear our kids, the education system that we allow to educate our children, and the lack of accountability or responsibility on our parts to make sure our kids are properly educated if we really do have a problem with the system that they're currently a part of. For me, the main thing when I see, and that's a real world issue, right? When I think about what's happening in the Black community with YouTube, I think about all of these different creators who are having these wars with one another, arguments with one another. And I'm thinking about how these people are building their platform off of Discord. And when I think about that, I think to myself, like, okay, so YouTube followers, and I'm still in the process of building my YouTube platform, right? So I have primarily been putting out content. I have my podcast is heard on pretty much every station that you can listen to, radio or podcast, right? But so, and I've been doing that for years. But YouTube is a place where people can now find something to do with their extra time. I think with COVID has been something that, squeezed people into these tight spaces and created some awkwardness between people. And essentially, we're looking for entertainment. So we go to YouTube. YouTube has lots of things. People like to see conversations. We like controversy. It's a lot of controversial issues and topics. People are going back and forth. But I think that all of that has to come from some place. And I feel like that has to do with how we are raised, how we're conditioned, the way that we've learned to relate to one another in our community. I feel like all of that has a lot to do with why YouTube creators with all the hostility and the negative energy are really, really getting really big and popular instead of sending people in the correct direction so they can get the help that they need, essentially. Okay. So obviously my producer is saying, let's move to the next subject. So Kevin Samuels discussion. How do you guys feel? I did mention him earlier, talked about him a little bit in that skit. How do you guys feel about his channel and its contribution to the Black and other communities? And I put that because I was listening to another content creator earlier today, and she mentioned that Kevin Samuels only interviews Black women on his channel. Now, I think this particular content creator's video was created prior to the episode that I saw, like a little snippet of, but it was a white girl on there that called in to dispute his concentration around finances being the key component that contributed to a man's value. And that's why she called in. And there were a lot of assumptions that he made about her, and he was inaccurate on all of the assumptions he made about her. He wanted to say that she was privileged. He wanted to say that because she was white, she came from an affluent family, affluent lifestyle. Her father had to be established in order for her mother to marry him, blah, blah, blah. But this young lady had different, commentary. So she was like, no, my father had no money. He didn't have employment. He didn't have a job when, he met my mother. However, she believed in him and she understood the value of a man is in the content of his character. As a result, they got married and they've been happy over the years. He did build. So although he wasn't a six-figure man then when they were younger, eventually he became quite established, right? And they lived comfortably. Kevin Samuels asked her questions around whether or not they had paid for her to go to school, who's paying for her apartment where she's living, who's paid for her stability in life and things. I think the girl was in her 20s. And she was the one who was already paying for these things. And her parents hadn't paid the way. And his thing was, well, if your parents died today, would you give away their legacy? Just because he assumed that there was a legacy to be left for her in general. But that's the only white girl that I've seen interviewed by him. I do have the question of why is it that Kevin Samuels pretty much targets Black people, though? And I do feel like after reviewing his earlier content, seeing him in his infancy, when he started out, I do feel like his intent was not Black women. I feel like his intention has always been, and I told you guys when I talked about accountability the other night, his intention has always been to gravitate towards male followers. So now this manosphere thing is real weird. It's doing some real weird stuff, right? And they're having conferences and all of that stuff, and they're supporting Kevin Samuels. And then the biggest thing is that they're gravitating to this cult-like mentality that I'm seeing in Umar Johnson's followers. And they feel like they need to protect Kevin Samuels at all costs. And essentially, they're willing to do whatever it is just to prevent you from having negative commentary about the information, about his purviews that are pushed out there into the YouTube environment. You said his message is for Black women, the people who are married at 24% rate. Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting. So what makes you feel like his message is for Black women? And can we go back to the comment that was made by William earlier, producer? I agree, Rainbow Rev. I feel like it's crazy. So he says, well, one issue is that the Black community is over-policed. As Dr. Bernice King says, the judicial system wasn't built by us, nor was it built for us. Another issue is the African-American community is the education. In the African-American community is the education system. We are the only race that don't have a clue about our heritage, and that's disturbing. Why is teaching critical race theory now a political play? They teach CRT in law school, but now you want to release our African-American youth into a world and they don't have what? Have what? Okay, so let me talk about that. Let's leave this comment up so I can dissect a little bit. So when Bernice is quoted saying that the judicial system wasn't built for us, nor was it built by us, these two things, right? We have to remind ourselves that us is a collective of the country that we come from. The Black community is a part of the collective American community. They're Black American people. You don't see Hispanic people coming into this country saying the judicial system of America was not built for us, right, or by us. Therefore, in attaining our citizenship, it doesn't represent us or our interest. You don't hear African people coming here saying that either. There are a lot of miscommunications, I feel, that perception, perception does things for us, like our vicarious trauma, all of that. So when we talk about our history, what do we mean by understanding our history? I do agree that there are a lot of Black American people who do not know Black history in America. They don't know the impact of history in America. And to be honest with you, I feel like if people were to become more aware of some of the things that are actually a part of their history in America, America is going to have to face, especially Black America, has to face a very difficult truth. And the amount of enabling, the amount of victimizing other people to be responsible for our own faults, right? Holding other people accountable for the things, the lack of progress that we've made individually and collectively. I think in owning our true heritage here and the progress that was made in the aftermath of slavery, even before slavery, if we really talked about the realities, okay, there's a lot that Black people are not prepared to sit with. That is the truth. That's the truth in the light. You know, I feel like we have a lot of deep-seated hatred that's being spewed on social media, not only on YouTube, but like everywhere. I feel like these celebrities, as we're unveiling all of the different intricate parts of the Tulsa incident and things like that, when we're going into these things and you're seeing the picture unfold, I think that there is a lot of emotional hostility that's being seeded into and revealed and unveiled in the Black people who are part of the Black and brown community here in America. It's just where I sit with that. And it's very dangerous. I feel like we have to understand that we are far evolved from the judicial system that was initially created. That's the first component. The second component is we, Black people, did create several components of the judicial system that's currently in place now. It's called politics, voting, legislation, showing up, right? So there are a lot of things that we have done. I think that there are some unrealistic goals, though. I think that for whatever reason, I think that the vast majority of the African American descendant population that is now referred to as Black America, I think that for some reason we think that we are not human. And in our non-human existence, we have an expectation that is unrealistic of a country that we are a integral component of. We're here, we're citizens, naturalized. We've been here all along, and we expect for the judicial system that is created for citizens of America, human beings that are naturalized citizens of America, and those people who come here as immigrants who gain their citizenship. So we have an idea that for some reason we need a separate set of laws, a separate set of constitution, a separate set of regulation for just us. For just us. Because we're not human or we're not American. I don't know which one it is. But help me understand what you mean when you say that. Okay? So the other component is, and this is a huge one, and you know, you guys sometimes don't feel like, you know, you want to be held accountable, but I'm here for accountability. The other part is when we say that our communities are over-policed. How realistic are we being in making that statement? So help me understand what you mean by over-policed. Let me pull up some crime statistics and stats in Black communities. Give me you guys' zip codes. Let's do Atlanta because I'm in Atlanta. So in Atlanta, this is the last stats, the most recent stats, of course. In the city of Atlanta, it's been 44 murders, 243 shootings, 55 rapes, 260 robberies, another 260 robberies, in another unincorporated portion of Atlanta, and 841 aggravated assaults. Let's look at Atlanta versus Chicago in 2021. Oh, we're what, 6 months in. So this is since May though, okay? As for rape, Chicago is the worst with 21 per 100,000 compared to 7 per 100,000. For 2021 from January to now, and now is in May, Chicago has had 195 murders, 865 shootings, 648 rapes, 2,218 robberies, and 1,576 aggravated assaults. Again, they say in adjusting the population for Atlanta, you're more likely to be a victim of murder, shootings, and aggravated assault than in Chicago, where you could just be raped, right? Like, you know. Any questions? Let me go back to my screen there. Anybody living in Chicago right now? So I haven't seen you guys' comments. Let me go to the comments. Let's see what you guys are saying. Let me be fair about this. So the Rainbow Rev says that is inaccurate. Which one? Let me share it. Let me share this report. White women get what? What do they get? They get what high value men are? Because this particular white woman that we talked about earlier today definitely, disagreed with Kevin Samuels on that sentiment. Hello, Jermaine G. But yeah. So Rainbow Rev, you're gonna have to type me which part of the conversation you were talking about. Let me see how I can share this. I probably got to make this screen smaller here. And put this here. Boom, boom, boom. And of course, you guys, I went to 11 Alive to do my time comparison because I love 11 Alive. Those folks are over there, they just have such great resources. Okay. I've been seeing you. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to share this over here so you guys can see it. George Floyd is an isolated event, William. What about all of these? Let's talk about these crime stats real quick. Here we go. Is that the one that has it? Let's. Got to make sure it didn't take me to a whole separate thing. Okay. All right. So there we go. Share. Okay. So are you guys seeing this? Is it big enough for you guys to see? These are the CDC stats. posted on 11 Alive's website for the current. When I say current, that's up to May. So again, let's see. At least 19 shot, 6 killed in another violent weekend in Atlanta. Interesting. So everybody watching that? Are we watching this? Are we looking at those stats? Any questions? Anybody disagree? Let's do population index. Atlanta. Neighborhood Scout. So this is Neighborhood Scout. I'm gonna share it with you guys too. Let me see if you guys can see this one. I'm gonna sharing now with 11 Alive. Let me make sure you guys can see this screen instead of the other one. So those are those stats. I'm gonna stop and I'm gonna share this one next. Okay, share screen, Chrome tab, and they're gonna go Atlanta crime rates and statistics. Now I'm sharing Atlanta crime rates and stats simply because I live in Atlanta, so that just makes more sense. However, if you guys have a city or if you type in a zip code or whatever, then I don't have a problem with sharing yours. I'm sure you guys can go and you can get this too. This is Neighborhood Scout. So it kind of keeps track of the crime that's called in and reported, things like that. So if we look at this at the bottom here, let me make sure you guys can see this really good. Nope, you can't. Hold on. Don't worry. Gotcha. All right. Okay, let's see. It's gonna get a little bigger, maybe, possibly. But so basically, if you're looking at this this picture, the lighter this area, so the lighter the area is, the less amount of crime. Okay. What's going on, Mario? How are you? Awesomeness. The darker it gets, the higher the crime is. Okay. Everybody see this? So this is Atlanta, Georgia, Center Hill, Cary Park area. Extremely ridden with crime. Let's see here. Benjamin E. Mays Drive, Southwest Atlanta. Yeah, pretty high crime rate. Let's go to the less high crime rate. Okay, lesser of the high crime. Cascade Road. Oh wow, that's great. Look at the Cascade is actually getting better. Cascade used to be pretty bad, but now it's getting better. Campbellton, Cedar Grove area. Not as bad as the other areas, but definitely ridden. Oh, look at Douglasville. It's nothing. It's great, right? That's why I chose Douglasville when I moved here. Okay, let's look at Smyrna. It's even bad over there in Vinings area. That's interesting. So come on, let's look at this. Anybody refuting these facts? Because it's pretty dark in here. Sylvania Hills, is that it? Sylvan Hills? Campbellton Road, of course. And these are heavily populated areas that are primarily Black. Just so you guys know. I'm pulling up the names so that people who live in this area can refute those facts as they come in. Riverdale Road area, Forest Park. I'm here for it, you guys. Help me understand. Okay. So again, William, I want to ask you the question. How is it possible that Black people are over police? These are Black communities. Let's look at the population here. Greatest income decrease. This is one of the areas that was highly ridden with crime too. Thomasville. Briarcliff Road. Simpson Road, Hamilton E. Homes. And that's, what do they call it? Projects like area. It's a pretty bad area of town. Battle Hill Haven. So these are people who were hit with the lowest, with the highest degree of income impact. So they lost the most money in the last 6 months or so. But yeah, so we can say that it is possible that to some extent, poverty aligns with the crime rate being so high in those areas, just those areas. But we literally just looked at the crime, okay? Everywhere, entire city of Atlanta. Everywhere. North, south, east, west, central, Atlanta, all of it. So again, help me understand. When you say that we're over police, because these are our communities, when we're over police, help me understand what it is that you mean. Because obviously we're having to call the police because we're experiencing a high degree of crime. And we're very highly likely to be murdered. We are. Us. The dark ones. Black ones. 100%. Hello, how are you? I feel like we don't have it often enough, but I feel like one of the main issues in our community, and I asked this question kind of across the board, what do you think is the major issue or one of the main issues here in the Black community in America? The answer that I got from William is that we were over police. So
because of the number of shootings we've had in the Atlanta area, a lot of you are obviously concerned.
And you can see why they're really concerned. Several of comments on our 11 Alive Facebook page comparing Atlanta's crime to Chicago's. Our very own Hope Ford takes a look at the data to verify if Atlanta's crime rate is on track with the Windy City.
When we posted about this weekend's violence on our 11 Alive Facebook page, many comments like this one poured in about the city of Atlanta. Another Chicago. Atlanta, aka the new Chicago. Is Atlanta trying to outdo Chicago? So we set out to verify, is Atlanta's crime rate worse or close to Chicago's? To verify, we went straight for the data. We pulled violent crime data from the Atlanta Police Department and the Chicago Police Department for the same time period in 2020 and 2021. Now, Chicago is bigger than Atlanta. There is more than 2 million people in Chicago compared to Atlanta's 500,000. So to make the comparison even, we only looked at the cities themselves, no metro areas, and we looked at the crime rate per 100,000 people. And you can see here, at this time in 2020, Chicago had 160 murders, 650 shootings, and 578 aggravated assaults. In Atlanta, for the same time in 2020, the city saw 29 murders, 172 shootings, and 626 aggravated assaults. But if we adjust for population and look at how likely you are to be a victim per 100,000 people, you'll see the likelihood of being murdered is equal. Both have 6 per 100,000 people. But in Atlanta, you're more likely to be a victim of aggravated assault and shootings than Chicago. For 2021, so far, Chicago's had 195 murders, more than 800 shootings, and more than 1,500 aggravated assaults. In Atlanta, it's 44 murders, 243 shootings, and more than 800 aggravated assaults. Again, adjusting for that population, in Atlanta, you're more likely to be a victim of murder, shootings, and aggravated assault than Chicago. So just based off the data, while Chicago has more crime, you're more likely to be a victim of certain violent crimes in Atlanta.
All right, thanks a lot, Hope. If there's something you want us to be...
So how do you guys feel about that? And William, of course, I know you live in a nice cush city outside of this main area of Atlanta or whatever, outside of that high crime index. But the reality is our crime rates, these are our cities. That is a huge issue, you know, and accountability is a huge component to being a person who now moves into a place that they can do or render effective change in the community. So if you tell me that the main issue is that we're being over policed, and we just talked about these stats per 100,000 people. If you can only give me 5 people, let's go back to his comment where he was naming Philandro Castile and Sandra Bland and Mr. Floyd. 3 people. And I mean, I could argue, I could give you another 2, 3. But if you can only give me them, and that's in the last 10 years, if you can only give me those people, and we're talking about the murders in our city. These are Black lives that are being lost at the hands of Black people. These are not Black lives being lost at the hands of police officers, sir. So per 100,000 people, you can't even give me a fraction of a person that's being over-policed. That's the reality. The problem with us is that we have a problem with accepting our reality and seeing facts as facts. That doesn't mean or negate, you know, the fact that the police officers need to be held accountable, but we also have to hold ourselves accountable. You understand? We do. So our issue becomes one of accountability. Our issue becomes one of not properly having the amount of police presence that we actually need, because maybe if we had a higher level of police presence, these people wouldn't commit these crimes. Who knows? I don't know. But let's look at anti-Afro comment. Let's go back to that. Since I think many of our people are too sensitive to tolerate open, honest discussions on this topic, often the response as if it's an attack rather than the situation needing to be addressed. I totally agree. So I'm a person that's, you know, I'm about outcomes, right? So the thing is, we can't reach an outcome that is a viable one until we take accountability. We first have to be accountable for the things that are happening in our community. As a result of us being accountable, we now see things for what they are. We can call a thing a thing. After we call a thing, we can move into action, right? The call to action is how we fix the issue. We have to have the call to action. We have to do something. We have to actively engage, having open conversations, helping people become more aware of what's going on in our community. And as a result of that awareness, we can move into a place of now resiliency, resisting that violence, and creating new behaviors in our society. That is the reality. Let's see. Trey says he's been watching Hidden Colors. That's why he says we're over police. I don't know what that is. You know, things go over my head. What's wrong with you? Okay, so let's see here. I need to go back to my speaking points so I can move to my next conversation piece. Okay, so now I'm asking about how you guys feel about Kevin Samuels, okay? Like I said, I did talk to him a bit, and I'm curious as to how you guys feel about his contribution to the Black community and other communities. When we talk about accountability, of course, I want to talk about the importance of having people who place resiliency factors in our communities. I do want to talk about that because I feel like Kevin Samuels is a conduit to us becoming more resilient. I just don't like him, but that's my personal preference. What can I say? I cannot like the dude, but I do say there is a tremendous amount of validity in some of his messages. I don't know how you guys feel about him. I do feel like he's entertaining. I will say that. I feel like he is an on-spot dresser. Okay? If it was a fashion show, he'd definitely win. However, I feel like sometimes he is in, a very combative, position with Black women. And I feel like that level of combatives, right, is unhealthy for the way that we interact with one another, the way that we display a regard for one another. You know what I'm saying? I feel like he has to step into a place of maturation. He came from a place where he didn't have adequate means to sustain his relationships. And I talked about this on 2 channels, so I'm not really going to go in depth with that. But to come from that place and to be so hurt, to be so broken that you now want to project all that energy onto these other women who are seemingly innocent. I mean, the ones that trolled him that one night with the girl blowing her nose, I was entertained. I was entertained. And I'm not even a person that follows this guy. And I'm not even with the aggression, right? But I feel like the way that he is with people is what creates that type of energy and makes people come towards him with that type of energy, right? So if we're talking about accountability, I feel like Kevin Samuels needs to be accountable for the type of father that he's been in his daughter's life. And I think he needs to be accountable to the Black community for seeding hate and inciting hate within our community and further dividing our families. One of the viewers, I think from yesterday's show, right? Either yesterday or day before. One of them is a Kevin Samuels follower. Let's see if he pulls up here today. And he mentioned to me that Kevin Samuels' end game is to restore. Did he say restore Black families or Black marriage? Something like that. However, if that is your goal, Kevin Samuels, you have to do it in a different way because that's not how you restore Black families or marriages. Because essentially, what you're doing is just causing more discord. You're causing Black people to think that they need to compete with their partners. And you're giving an unrealistic imprint of what a person is if they have value. And I kind of want to go into that. Everybody has a different expectation for the person that they choose to be their life partner, share life with, bond with, go forward and marry. Everybody has a different idea of that simply because we are all individuals. Differentiation is what makes this nation great. It's what makes people authentically valuable. Okay. A person has high value when they meet what you need, but they also do not overstep boundaries that you've created for your life. That's when a person has high value. The content of a person's character is the most prevalent component of that person's value. Period. You said Kevin Samuels is no crueler than parents and life. Life is not cruel and life is fair as long as you allow it to be fair and just for you. You make your choices. You make your, decisions as to what it is you engage in. And as a result of that, life yields what you put into it. Kevin Samuels is not giving a person the yieldings of what they're putting into the conversation. He's giving them his very emotional, hostile decision and his very emotional and hostile response because they make him feel a certain way. And, I don't know if I think he's cruel. I think he's quite abrasive, though. I feel like he's just hurt, and hurt people. They act out. He's a whole child. He needs to grow up. But I share the same sentiments in so many ways about the way that, what's his name? Tommy Sotomayor puts out some of his content. I feel like although there is some level of logic, right? And some of the things that he might say for his particular experiences, I feel like he's not necessarily helping people become their most altruistic selves, authentic selves, and actualize. And that's not necessarily healthy. You said, let's see. So, how do you guys feel about his contribution though to the community? Do you guys feel like he is helping families? You feel like he's saving marriages? Curious about that. Okay, so Umar Johnson discussion. How do you feel about his work in your community? Now, notice I said your, and I said that for a reason. I want to know how you guys feel like he's impacting Black families that you are exposed to. I guess the question would be, a larger question is, how do you feel about the content that he's putting out there? How do you feel like, how do you feel about the way he approaches people who follow him? How do you feel about the people who follow him? How do you feel about them and the type of energy they have? All of that. You said, I say Kevin Samuels is cruel due to his focus on weight and objectifying women. I totally agree with that. Like, totally share your sentiments. But I still don't feel like that's him being cruel. I really feel like that's him being a broken man. I feel like he has been hurt so bad by people, by women that he has dated. I feel like the real issue is that he pushes people talking about they should go to therapy, but I feel like he's that guy that tells people therapy is for people who got something wrong with them. So the negative connotation is associated with it, and therefore it's meant for him to be condescending. You said model agencies focus on weight and looks. Excuse me. You're right. So the difference in modeling agencies is that people are actually vying for a job that is based off of their presentation. So Kevin Samuels is not hiring these women in any way, shape, form, or fashion. Secondly, they're not vying to be with Kevin Samuels. They're seeking advice as to how it is that they can find themselves married or attuned to the right energy. Because their situation isn't yielding what it is that they feel their life should be yielding at that point. It said everyone has been broken. We can't say that to discredit someone. The truth is the truth, no matter how it's said. No, and no. So it's not to discredit Kevin Samuels' insights. Discrediting Kevin Samuels' insights is just fact. Okay. And the fact is, every man doesn't have the same idea of a woman adding value to them just by being a good trophy. Some men value women with a high degree of education. Some men value women that can add value to them in their advisements. Some men value women who have a very high content of their character. Some men value women that hold them accountable so they can grow. Some men value a woman who have, or a man, whatever their preference is, I have to say, they value someone that can help them become the greatest version of themselves. That's just what it is. So it doesn't matter if he's hiring, he's selling them No, $1 billion industry does not weigh in on the relationship matters of people in the Black community. They only weigh in on the usefulness of that person and their purpose and their intent to be employed as a model. So the body surgery, makeup, hair, etc. I think women, makeup and hair has been a thing since the beginning of people. Even if we go back to the Aztecs, they made makeup out of berries and things like that. They used the element to make their makeup. Also men, Native Americans, Asian men, Asian women. So makeup has been around since BC's, before Christ. Okay. So that's something that is a complementary factor. It's meant to give you the look that you're looking for, to prepare you for a particular mood, etc. The physical component, as far as the surgeries and modifications to people, that's something that is as a result of all of these men overstepping their boundaries and telling women that what I really want you to do is go and have this particular feature or this figure or whatever, right? And the reality is they just want a trans man or trans woman. You can go and just get a trans woman if you want a person to get all of these surgeries. Like, really, that's really what you're saying you want, but you don't realize that's what you're saying. So a woman in her willingness to become what it is that you men are following and all of these social media sites, Instagram, double clicking and all that good stuff, they tend to be less confident in the way they move and the way they look, and they have body image issues as they're going through these various stages of identity crisis. As a result, they go in and get these surgeries so they can modify themselves to become the element of attraction for these men that are telling them that this is what you need, this is what you don't need, etc. So no, it's not men making women do it. It's your ideals around what your expectation is of women that is shaping their ideas around their attractiveness to the men, because they're looking for the men. It just is what it is. Men, oh yeah, lots of men have been telling Black women to go natural, and it's happening. It's a thing. It's a whole movement. Most Black women, and this is the thing that led to what's her name? Monique. This is what led to Monique's discussion, because so many women have been shamed into going natural by these expectations of men. Now, Monique has to police the appearance of and the value of appearance in public of young Black women, because they think that going natural means that you don't naturally care for your hair, that you don't make sure that you look presentable, that when you go outside, it's okay for you to wear bonnet or whatever. And it was interesting. Tasha K did a review on live the other day, and she misspoke. And I keep telling you guys, you know, for you American people that don't get outside of America and live and immerse yourself in these other cultures, before you make these very invalid assumptions about people in other countries, get out, find yourself some real life exposure instead of just listening to the admissions of other people, right, that haven't even gone outside of the country. And I say do that because, like, you know, I can't tell you anything about these wonderful folks. But so she misspoke, and she said that African people do it all the time. They go outside with bonnets on and scarves on in public all the time. And this African woman was highly offended, and she got on there and wrote her ass a book, because the reality of it is this: they don't do that. African people are very prideful, and I've told you guys this several times. They're very prideful when it comes to how they present themselves. These people have a sense of self that is beyond anything that I've ever seen in any other culture that I've ever explored personally. And so she corrected her, and she was like, no, these are head wraps, and they're a fashion statement. They complement the outfit that we're in. And, you know, and she was like, so that's a lie. Get yourself together, honey. We ain't doing that. So it was interesting to me, you know, I'm just sitting back. So you can't be making assumptions of people in their culture because you're on the outside looking in, and you see them as less valuable because you're trying to relate in a way that's unrelatable. African and African American people, Black American people, y'all are not the same. Just stop. But so that's the end of that. You have to be able to be held accountable for the things that you do. And that's the other thing. If you're going to compare yourself to African people, if you're going to be of the image of African people, right? You have to hold your community accountable, because they do that 110%. They do that. So you have to talk about these very difficult topics that make you unpopular around your family, unpopular around your friends, unpopular at work or whatever, in order for us to achieve effective change in our community. We can't just go around blaming everybody else for our problems and our lack of, authenticity in our approach to be successful in life, being lazy. No. So, no, Trey, they don't. But so let's see, what's our next one? Oh, Umar Johnson. How are you guys feeling about his work, the work that he's doing in the community? Like I said, do you guys feel like he's moving towards opening a school that will open opportunities for Black people to be educated on Black issues and Black history and everything that they're missing and everything in between, and help them to achieve financial wealth? Like, what are your thoughts around Umar Johnson? Curious about that. So personally, I have done quite a bit of reviewing, and apparently, feel away. Totally, they feel away, and that's okay. I feel like, I know, right? His work in collecting money, because I see him collecting money. I see him collecting. A lot of people like, oh, he's just begging for money and things like that. But as a person who has been targeted because I've talked about him and have not been kind to what I've reviewed, I have to say, I feel like the community has felt, I don't know if it's just an emptiness in the community to where they were looking to fill a void. And for you guys who are followers of Umar, definitely come on here. Give me your insights. Tell me what it is that you are ready to support. What are his initiatives? What are his goals? What are his end goals? How much money have you donated to him recently? How you feeling about that? Curious. But you said Umar Johnson is running a long-standing affinity for. I totally agree. There is no intent to open a school. I agree with that too. But I don't think that the vast majority of people who have pushed him out there, pushed his content out there, I don't feel like that's what they believe. I feel like people genuinely believe that this guy has great intentions and that he has all of the answers to what's wrong with the Black community. And his idea that a war is coming is a real thing and not a delusion. And all of that, not that he was completely off beat when he said that Black people wouldn't get stimulus checks. So you guys got all of these stimulus checks and money for PPP loans and things like that, the help from your government that he said wouldn't come about. And you still are following him. Help me understand what your logic is. So that's my question on the Umar topic. Let's see. What's our next one? What is your method for dating? I identified the fact that the Black community also has another issue when it comes to relating to one another in a capacity for them to solidify healthy relationships, right? And I talked about the fact that Kevin Samuels has his platform as a result of that issue. However, this question right here and this question right here are the reason that Kevin Samuels exists. I think that there is an unrealistic purview taken on about marriage, in this generation of people, and also sexual involvement, sexual promiscuity, and things like that in the Black community. And as a result of it, people end up having kids with people that they don't intend to have children with, and as a result, the kids go unwanted. And I know that you guys don't really understand it. I've talked about that in a huge way when I've talked about the mental health matters and, the intricacies of what's going on in the Black community. But when a child is inside of a womb where the parent that's carrying that child doesn't desire, want, love genuinely and have affect for that child, or the father, that child ends up having an emotional splitting of sorts, and it leads to instability in the way that they see relationships, the way that they see people, the way they see relating, period. And I think that that is what we have right now. So these young people are now multi-dating as a result of that. So they start to date many people at one time, and by some insane algorithm, they're expecting for one person to select them to marry them amidst all of this multi-dating, where you're entangled with sexual relations and going out and sharing energy with all of these different people. Like that part really doesn't make sense to me. But I'd like to know what you guys' method of dating looks like. What's your process? And do you feel like it contributes or is a contraindicator to the issues in the Black community? Do you feel like your method of dating is a healthy one that people should probably mimic some of the styles or some of your processes? Or do you feel like it's something that's toxic and as a result of the issues of discord when it comes to relatability? And people having children outside of being married or tethered to one another with the mindset of a lifetime, going into that relationship. And I know it's like layered, right? But I feel like all of those tie into the way people perceive marriage, sex, sexual promiscuity within the context or out of the context of being married. What dating looks like, whether or not they tether to someone physically and stuff like that. So how do you guys feel about the level of connection and relatability that you have with the people you've had children with, but also about it in general? I think it was like last week that we saw that video again where the girl and her baby's daddy was having issues and he came to pick up the child at 6:30 in the morning. A lot of people, and I mean, I have other people that I follow on social media, people that are content creators. I think when I looked at, when I looked at, what's his name? The official urban therapist. When I looked at his review of that situation, his separate review from the one that I saw on Toxic Masculinity show or whatever. When I looked at that review, one of the things that he mentioned is that 6:30 is an acceptable time for this guy to be showing up at the baby mama's house unannounced. Inside of the video, however, I noticed that this guy mentioned several times that this girl had blocked him and they have a child together. Make it make sense to me. She had blocked him, that he can't call his kid. He can't see his kid. He hasn't seen his kid for a length of time. And he's just trying to see his kid at 6:30 in the morning. 6:30 is typically the time that kids get up, get ready for school, and get off to school, get on the bus, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the huge components that I talked about is the importance of co-parenting, the importance of learning how to relate to the people that you choose to lay down and have sex with, whether your intention is to have kids with them and build with them in a long-term way or not. When you invest your energy in other people and you tether yourself to other people, there has to be some level of a standard of accountability that we hold ourselves to as people in general that makes us gravitate towards building a healthy enough relationship with them that we can co-parent in a way that's beneficial to the life of the child, right? So I just feel like sometimes we're not realistic when we build our relationships with other people, and that when we move into these spaces where we're having kids with them or we're having sex with people before ever being married to them. And the reality is this: you can have these issues after having been married and now being divorced. because I think it was, there is a celebrity. Can't remember who it was. Was it Tyrese who had the issue with seeing his kid? I can't remember. But there was a celebrity who had an issue with seeing his kid, and there was a lot of content out there during the long and drawn out battle for custody and access and visitation to the child and stuff like that. And I think that in being able to see these types of things happen to people that look like us, right? Because I feel like in the Black community, we're always talking about the importance of people who look like us and living the lifestyle that's modeled by those who look like us. When we go to therapy, when we conceptualize therapy and the healing component and the idea that we can adopt new or better ways of being and becoming, we say that those ideas are Eurocentric, because people that look like us are not advocating for therapy, for healing, for revealing the layers and taking accountability for the things that we need to in our lives to move into mature spaces, taking responsibility for the things that we need to in order to mend our relationships and blend ourselves within our network in a way that's conducive to the overall gain to the people that we're connected to and ourselves, right? So I think that it boils down to this key component. It's very sad. Parental alienation is a huge issue in our community. And I don't know why we have such negative, energy when it comes to the people that we decided to lay down with. That doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. But it is what it is. So this one brings me to this. Have you ever dated and or married a person who has come forward and disclosed having had issues with mental, emotional, or behavioral balance and or wellness? So what this question essentially asks is, have you ever been tethered to the energy of a person who has disclosed to you openly that they struggle with a mental health condition, a mental health disorder, be it PTSD, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, DMDD, personality disorder, any of those things? And I'm going to say this. I don't know how I feel about the necessity of disclosing your mental health status to people that you're in a relationship with, that, or should I say that you're in the vetting stages with, just kind of seeing whether or not something is there. But I think that once you get to the dating stage where you're moving into something serious, I think that those are disclosures that should be made, especially if you have a confirmed diagnosis of a severe mental illness where that requires, some level of energy or effort on the part of your partner to be healthy in supporting you as you navigate the difficulties that come with having to deal with this disorder every single day. So you said no disclosure, but something was clearly going on. Okay, so what are some of the signs or symptoms that you feel were indicative that this person had some level of mental health disorder or a diagnosis? Because this is a heavy one, you guys. I've hosted family members of people struggling with schizophrenia. I've hosted a children of substance users group. I've depressed, dysthymia or persistent depression. I've hosted those groups for family members and things like that. And that the impact of mental health issues, especially for the length of time that we in the Black community especially will go without getting the proper help. We can know that there is something there. We could know unobjectively that there is something going on with us. Things are not right with us. We're up and down all the way around. We're seeing and hearing things that we know damn well aren't there, right? Like, these are things that we in our community could know without a shadow of a doubt, and we still won't go get the help that we need because we're afraid of what that means for the way that people outside of us see us. And that's what breaks my heart for our community. Okay, you said mood changes. You mean like sudden mood changes, erratic behavior, or are we talking like they're having a good day and then the day starts to go bad because something happens? Because that's a difference. That's not to discredit the possibility that something was going on, though, because a lot of times we don't realize it, but we are acting out in ways that definitely justify that there is something there, and there is some level of discord, and there is some level of miscommunication with maybe the chemicals that are in our brain, or just with the way that we receive the world around us. So perception has a lot to do with the way people act out. And I also say community, right? Environment shapes our responses. So sometimes we respond in hostile ways and unhealthy ways because our environment and our family of origin has taught us to be that way. Hey, Deandra, how are you? Definitely, we have to have these conversations. Said I work in forensics, a lot of undiagnosed trauma coupled with substance use. Yeah, co-occurring disorders, dual diagnosis people, and sometimes they just suffer the worst simply because we are not doing our due diligence in our field to really acknowledge what's at the root of the issues that are presented. We look at the behaviors and that's it. And the one thing that I talk about a lot is the fact that in this field, there are so many people, right? Qualified professionals, doctors, psychiatrists, all of that, okay? Who will prescribe a pill for everything that a person does. So there's a pill for every behavior that is an undesired behavior or a behavior that's out of the context with the expectation of culture. Instead of addressing the underlying issues that are at the root of the behaviors. You said, how big a role do you think anti-Blackness plays in our behavior? When you say anti-Blackness, help me understand what you mean. Unpredictable mood changes. Yeah. Mood disorders are definitely a thing. I mentioned DMDD, DMDD is disruptive mood dysregulation disorder, and it is, to me, the beginning of us understanding the behaviors that are leading to us being able to adequately assess for and diagnose personality deficits or personality disorders. But of course, it's definitely indicative of heavy trauma in childhood, unaddressed issues, things that we suppress, those types of things. She says, great question. Love to hear this answer. Me too. I just need clarity on what he means by anti-Blackness, because that could be so much. That's like a loaded question. Let's see. Trey, have you ever dated someone who was diagnosed with a mental health condition? We'll say anti-Blackness is a system designed to maximally mistreat people classified as Black in all areas of people activity. Okay, so when you say anti-Blackness, though, in your question, are you talking about how does being a part of that system or being on the receiving end of that? Or are you talking about the outside behaviors of people who are anti-Black, that component in mental illness? Because I talked about racism in of itself as a mental illness on a different podcast, and I think that was live too. What? I'm just asking. It's a valid question. Have you ever been in a relationship with someone that has a confirmed diagnosis of any mental health disorder? Because I mean, mental health disorders, it's a lot of them. We have personality disorders. We have psychotic disorders. We have some that are more like behavioral neurocognitive disorders. We got everything. So it doesn't, every disorder is not one that drives people to do things that affect their partners. But I do think that some severe mental illnesses do require a huge amount of support of the partner and the family of the person, the system of the family. And what I was talking about when I talked about hosting those groups and holding spaces for people to come together in one space and talk about their experiences and the effects of substance use on them as children, being kids of substance users. Man, that stuff was heavy, a lot of it. It's because substance use it's an entire culture. People who are substance users, they oftentimes think that the people on the outside that are connected to them, they think that they have no idea, especially kids. They think that kids don't know they're using substances. They think that kids aren't affected by their substance use because it's their business. They feel the same way about their intimate partners, their wives, their husbands, etc. And it's a negative connotation on the health of the entire family system. And it's a real issue in the Black community. You said anti-Blackness is synonymous with racism. It's the only form of functional racism that exists. I'll go check your video on the subject of racism. Awesomeness. So, but I mean, are you... I get that component, right? But are you asking me how? And I guess I'll just answer both sides of it. Let's go back to the original question. His original question, I think, was, or her original question was, how does anti-Blackness affect behaviors? Not that one. So let's give my production team some time to find that question really quickly. But I feel like racism is a thing that affects the behaviors of people in the Black community, because racism in and of itself, if we look at the continuum of racism, what it has been and what it is now. And I think I talked a little bit about the experiences and vicarious traumatization and things like that at the onset of this video as well. So if we look at the impact of, not just racism, but if we look at the impact of slavery and then segregation and then post-segregation and then integration, right? Integration where Black people are now moving into spaces more heavily populated with people of the white race and other, and the way that they interact with people. I think that there is a high degree of emotional instability, suspiciousness. I think that it makes us anxious around people who don't look like us. I think it creates this mindset that everybody in the world is against us and that we are lesser than. I call it the inferiority complex, where we feel like as a result of racism, as a result of someone saying that we were lesser than at some point in our existence as people who are descendants of African Americans, right? As a result of that experience, post-slavery and things like that, like we currently are in a system that is not created for us. And these are our perceptions. However, for many of us, we don't look at the entirety of the situation that lands us in places and spaces where we are being ridiculed, where we're being a part of the justice system and things like that. And so it makes it very, very hard for us to gauge what is racism and what is just the hateful spirit of people that we happen to deal with. And it's not necessarily based on race per se, but a collective of the demographics of the population, of crime statistics and things like that. The stuff that I brought up earlier in this live. So you guys can probably go back and check that content out. But also on the opposite of the end of the spectrum, I believe the people who are racist in the here and now, right? Whether it's Black people or white people, because we can all be racist. But I think that the people who are racist have significant underpinnings of insecurities that incite their purviews, and it has a lot to do with that inferiority complex as well, because they realize that in this space where there is equality and there are laws that now equally apply to Black people, right? They realize that now they cannot do the things that their ancestors maybe did. They cannot respond in the way that they may have responded, because there are a lot of people who are from that era. That's what I tell people. You know, I grew up seeing a lot of things in the segregation era and things like that. There are a lot of folks that are still alive with those same racist sentiments. There are a lot of people in their 80s, their 90s, even 100 and over. And there are white people who refuse to accept or see a Black person for what they are. And their interactions with Black people include several microaggressions. However, I do tell Black people who are clinicians all the time, we have these conversations about recognizing and calling a thing a thing. Sometimes there are microaggressions that are, referred to race relations. And sometimes they're just mean people, hateful people. And those hateful people are what they are. So I brought up the topic of George Floyd, for example. When we look at what happened to him on camera, in front of the world, in front of all of us, the impact of it all, right? Derek Chauvin is a person who had some real serious issues. But the first thing that we wanted to say is that it was because he was racist and because George Floyd was Black that he handled him in the way that he did. Then I'll let that sit there for a while. And I want to hear how many of you guys were in support of that notion. Type of 1 if you believe that initially. Type of 2 in the chat if you didn't believe that, if you didn't buy that, if you were curious as to what his history with people and his interactions with people in the community in general look like. Because I'm one of the people who was initially, I was like, oh my God, he did that because he's a Black guy. And then I became really curious because everybody that knows me, I'm a systemic practitioner. So I'm always looking at the way that all of the pieces of the puzzle fit in. I'm always looking at what motivated this to become this or that to become that person that think that way, move that way, do that thing. All of these things. I want to know the underlying issue. Tell me it all. So in my research of his history, right, and the complaints lodged against him, I found that Derek Chauvin's issue was a deeper seated issue. It was an issue of him being biased towards people who use substances because he could always use the absence of a sober mind as an excuse as to why he was overzealous in his interactions with them. There were several complaints lodged by white people. There were several complaints lodged by Black people. This guy had a tremendous amount of people who spoke out against him in their social media interactions. Now, mind you, they were substance users, right? So there were no formal complaints lodged in half of these cases, at least. I think I found, 46 or something like that. I think out of all of the cases that I found where people had spoken out against him and the things that he did, they were substance users that had a known history of using substances and a heavy history of interactions with the police department in his particular area that he was responsible for patrolling. And every time they had an interaction with him, it was a negative issue versus the other officers who handled them with respect. Substance use is not a reason to disrespect the person, because they're having issues and they're having issues navigating life and their trauma, just like you. Derek Chauvin is a very broken person, and there are so many things that are in alignment with the fact that he has antisocial personality disorder, zero affect whatsoever, zero accountability for what he's done, not only to George Floyd, but several other people. There were two white guys, no, one white and one Asian, Pacific Islander, other, who died in his custody as well. And that's within the 3-year time span. Like for me, 2 year, 3 year, I can't remember. But for me, sometimes we're so busy looking at the thing that we feel is the biggest issue at hand that we don't realize what the real biggest issue at hand is. And I feel like police brutality is a real issue in America. I feel like the magnitude in which the black community is regarded by police officers, that's an issue, but it's an us issue too about accountability. You said, I don't know if Chauvin was a racist, but in the world in which I exist, I'm duty bound to suspect that he could be a racist. Totally understand. Those were my sentiments exactly when it happened. But I needed to understand the behavior, because my thing is, people don't just all of a sudden murder somebody on camera with that energy. They don't. They just don't do that. Another thing is that I suspected some level of a personality disorder or something was wrong with him based off of his responses to the crowd that is videotaping him. And I feel like the people who are police officers that are on the same squad as him, that were there and present that day, that never checked on the person, that was never a threat, but ended up on the ground face down in a very compromising position, and knowing that he was under the influence and the effects that does on the respiratory system and on the brain. I think that those people did George Floyd an injustice. They did our society an injustice, and they are not a proper representation of what proper policing period looks like, outside of just the Black experience. But I do feel like there is a tremendous amount of trauma in the aftermath of an event like this that affects the behaviors of people. People who are racist, they have some issues. Their behaviors are like they are because those people who are racist have their own insecurities about who they are in their journey to becoming. Whether it's a Black person that's a racist, that's like, I don't need white people because they're white. Doesn't make sense. We all live in the same country. Or a white person, I don't need Black people because they're Black. Doesn't make sense because we're all in the same country. I don't understand those sentiments. People are people. So American citizens are American. The division by the classification or characterization of Black or white is something that should have gone out of enforcement or regard ages ago. Because the reality is, if you've done any type of Ancestry.com, DNA sequencing and things like that, you would find that you're mixed with a lot of things. So it is what it is. You said, has Chauvin ever murdered any non-Black people due to his substance use bias? Yes. I mentioned he murdered 3, or they died in his custody. 3 of them. So who's to know? Nobody was there to record how they died, right? But the family members of those people are still asking for answers. You said trying hard to impress is a no-go. Trying indicates it's not natural. I don't know what you mean by that. Let's see. What's my next thingy? Let me see. That's that one. Okay. So the thing is, lots of people who have been in relationships with people that are, off kilter, or people whose behaviors are suspect, right? I feel like sometimes they stay just because they figure they've already been married, or they've been with a person for so long and they don't want to be discriminatory. But staying in these situations is very unhealthy. It's unhealthy for our being. It creates other mental distress for us. And it creates a pattern of behavior that's unhealthy for us in the way that we engage people after the fact. You said people forget what police face. They see death day in and day out. Yeah, their trauma is real. I also don't auto-attribute it to racism. Anyone who refused to comply would have been restrained. I totally agree with that sentiment as well. I feel like that's why I said we have to look at what leads to the interactions with the police and the escalation of the interaction with police. Because even though we talk about the fact that police inadequately and over police our communities, the one thing we don't talk about is there are more police interactions in Black communities that don't lead to death, that don't lead to the over policing of our community. And that's what I was talking about with William's comment earlier. So he says, I disagree. My uncle was in NYPD for 20 years. He did not see death day in and day out. He never used his service weapon. That's interesting to say. So when you say when you say that they see death day in and day out, I don't think that she's saying that they're killing people day in and day out. I think that they're saying that this is something that they're faced with. And death in a police station is the same as when we go to war. You know, I'm a retired military officer, but it's the same as when we go to war. So whether I have a direct contact with an insurgent or my soldiers have a direct contact with insurgents, it affects me, it affects our unit, it affects us. As a whole. And I do agree, most policing is ticket writing, but you do have to go back and you do have to have meetings and things like that before you start your day so that people know what area they're going to be policing, right? And in that discussion, they have briefs. That's what it is. It's a briefing. So it is what it is. Okay, so but what I was saying is that in our relationships with people that have mental health issues, sometimes they don't, and that goes for police officers too. I think people in every occupation experience some level of traumatic event or distress with their interactions with other people. People are mean these days. That's the reality. I have more and more patients coming in with generalized anxiety disorder symptoms because they've been in a workplace that is super toxic for 10 years or more. As a result, they have become unraveled because everything they do has to be done so intricately that they don't upset another person. It can't look this way, can't take a lunch break at 1 minute over, things like that. And these unhealthy ways of relating to people in the workplace, in our personal lives, create significant clinically relevant distress. And so as a result, especially Black people. I say that, especially Black people, because we are so mean to one another, like so mean to one another. Look at Kevin Samuels. He's built his platform off of us, watching him be mean to us. And that's entertainment for us. So I feel like we have to be accountable for the misdeeds and the missteps that we are, an intricate component to in our community. He said, but are Black people incorrect to suspect racism in any of their dealings? Any of their dealings or all of their dealings? I'm going to recommend a movie for you guys too that's going to talk to that question. But I want you to clarify that one for me really quick. You don't see him as mean? Who? Kevin Samuels? Yeah, I mentioned that earlier too. But I mean, people are mean to people in general. Kevin Samuels is extremely abrasive. And I mentioned that earlier. He's more of a person that is extremely hurt. And as a result, he is emotionally reactive. That's basically what he is. And some of that emotion, I mean, when men too get up, when they get under his skin and they don't play to his tune, he curses them out, calls them names, and then deletes them from his show. Because a person does not and will not accept your truth as their own truth does not mean they're any lesser than you. And it doesn't mean that you have to, resort to name calling. You're an entire grown man. Like, who does that? Kevin tells people to get back with their exes. Well, sometimes I think that that's an appropriate thing, but I think that, and that's what I said earlier. I don't think that his message oftentimes doesn't have merit. I think sometimes it's the approach and it's the level of objectivity. So you cannot speak for the most or the vast majority of men. You just can't. Like, no man can do that, period. That's why we do studies on human behavior, so we understand why people operate and what they should do or what they shouldn't do in response to things. We need to study the brain. fMRI imaging gives us a very clear picture of the human brain and how it reacts and how it responds on a comparative level when it comes to people that are from different backgrounds, systemic connections, etc. That's why our studies are so comprehensive. So you cannot talk about the preferences of all men without having conducted an adequate study. Black men, even. Said he is one of the only Black men that are telling Black men to marry Black women. Black men don't need to be told what to do. I talked about the fact that men have a natural position of leadership. If you are a man who is following the guidance instead of taking the advisements of another man, you have to understand that there is a serious issue there with the way that our community is set up to cultivate Black men. Kevin Samuels, Umar Johnson used Black women as punching bags, right? No matter what the determined can always find victims. It doesn't make what they do justified. I don't think it makes what they do justified, but I will say this. I have watched, bits and pieces of Kevin Samuels' material, and I feel like there are some areas that he touches on that provides more insight to the people that call into his show. But I also have done a video where I hold Black women accountable that are calling his show, because at the end of the day, there are certain types of women that have no need for the type of rhetoric that Kevin Samuels put out there. And we would never call Kevin Samuels for advice. I just would never call Kevin. I just never could imagine it. My kids, my daughters in their 30s, no. I feel like there is a high deficit of Black fathers in homes. And there is a high deficit. And like I told you guys, I talked about that video of this girl refusing to let this guy see his child. And yet you have some other guy there at the same time of the morning that you're saying it's inappropriate for this dude to see his child, and you blocked him. That's the problem. It's the us. I don't feel like it's the responsibility. I don't feel like it's the fault necessarily of the women, but I feel like it is the fault of the Black culture for not conditioning correctly cohesiveness and level-headed mindsets where Black women and Black men know how to complement one another, know how to complement people in general that they're tethered to in a relationship. So I think that to that extent, I feel like Kevin Samuels' platform has some purpose. I don't know. But also to give men who are broken, who have gone through the same experiences that he has, and been discarded by these women with these overarching expectations without a clear, line of delineation of what it is that they're going to bring, to the relationship and what their value is. I think it also gives these men some level of validity in their trauma, responses that they've had over the years. And I don't feel like it's healthy for them to be trauma bonding, but that's what they do. And essentially they start using it against one another and building platforms to combat one another. That's what we're seeing with Tommy Sotomayor and what's his name? The basketball player. So yes, you are right. Can we go back to that last comment? I don't think I saw it when I was talking. Yes, they targeted vulnerable women who are lost and offer themselves up to a male they know who will ridicule and disrespect them. Neither has relationships with their children. And here's the thing, Kevin Samuels is, I could understand if he was the epitome of this thing that he was pushing, but he isn't. He said we have to learn how to peacefully co-parent once the romantic relationship is over, Black men and women. I think that you have to learn how to peacefully co-parent before the relationship starts. I disagree to that extent. I feel like the thing that is missing in many of the Black communities many issues around co-parenting is that co-parenting is seen as an after the fact issue. So co-parenting is the act of shared parental responsibility in cultivating, molding, shaping this young life, right? And to be honest, this is your one job as a parent, literally, protecting, providing, cultivating, molding, shaping that life. And co-parenting is something you do in unison or collectively with yourself and the other parent, yourself and the other parent and their other significant other when they move on. It's a thing that starts from the very beginning at the point where the mother is pregnant with the child. And so if you are attuning yourself to the proper level of energy and insight needed to psychosocially condition this child to be ready to go out into the world, to be birthed into this world, then your community is healthier, your family is healthier, your ideals are healthier, the behaviors of your children are healthier, and mental health issues start to dissipate completely in the community of Black people. On that end of the spectrum, anyway, when it comes to attachment trauma. Says, we don't know Kevin Samuels' personal life regarding his children. UJ, we do know. Well, actually, we do. There's a lot of information out there, and there are a lot of conversations that his daughter has had, not only with myself but other content creators, that talks about her relationship or lack thereof with her father, and she's currently in college right now. But it is what it is. So the question, do you feel the Black community is at a disadvantage? What do you think has caused this? This is a really interesting one to me. I'm ready to hear what you guys' commentary is around this question, because this is something that I feel like there was a viewer here yesterday, and this person asked me about whether or not I felt like something was happening in the Black community. Can't remember exactly what he said. And I think that you guys have kind of talked to some of the police interaction issues that you guys feel like are relevant to the overarching community issue in the Black community. I feel like you guys have also spoke to the over policing thing, or your perception of that piece. I've given you guys the receipts. I showed you guys the video, showed you guys the run through the articles, showed you guys crime stats and things like that. I showed you guys how many Black people are dying at the hand of other Black people. I showed you guys what the crimes are when it comes to rape. Talked about assault. So we've talked per 100,000 people. I want you guys to remember those very high numbers that I mentioned earlier. So per 100,000 people in the population, this is how many people were killed. Us is us, by the way, just us, not by the police, but us, just us. So I want you to talk about what's caused our disadvantages. For me, I feel like the lack of cohesiveness in understanding proper problem resolution as a community as a whole, and the lack of accountability has led to the disadvantages of the Black community. I think a lack of culture and heritage and conditioning in the proper way has led to the disadvantages of the Black community. Also, I think Umar Johnson is a very interesting character. He has incited hate, racism, division, further hate, and all of these things into our community for years now. And we've seen the crime index skyrocket. We've seen our kids become more and more lost and off the continuum and struggle with who they are. in a major way. You say poverty. I also talked about that. So we looked at the income index as well earlier. That's what I showed earlier. So when you we're at the end of this video, but go back to the very beginning of the video and look at the poverty index as it applies to the crime index. So while I would love to say that poverty is the reason that these things are happening, it isn't. And we're talking about 2021 stats. 2021 stats. Yeah. So, but that is oftentimes the excuse that most Black people use when they say that's the reason that we kill each other, because we're all in poverty. So I also want to kind of point to one point of contention, right? I want to talk about our perceptions. How do we view what poverty is or isn't? How do we view what wealth is or isn't? How do we prioritize our finances in the Black community? Have we never stopped just for a second or two to just sit with that? Have we never stopped to ask the question why it is that we engage in certain types of criminal behaviors that are indicative of certain talents that we possess, like forgery, what is that? Robbery. What is that other one? What is that other one they accused Black people of? Not that one, the one that shows they have extreme talents. Well, assault too, they could go to the military with that, but goodness, what is that? Deceit, theft by deceit, the PPP loan thing. That thing. So they have the resources to come up with all of these things. You could be out here doing graphic design and stuff like that with all that talent. And not the strong arm robbery. I mean, I feel like that's a talent as well for the military. But the one that I was talking about is theft by deceit with that PPP loan thing. So they had the ideas. I mean, a lot of them too. That's the crazy thing. You got the ideas, you got the mindset to go out here and be successful in business. And you'd rather do the thing that will get you locked up. Like, I don't understand that mindset. I really don't. But so, how were you taught to handle disagreements? And I talked about that too with the other one. How are you taught to handle disagreements, and where did you acquire the skill set? In your upbringing, at home, your family of origin, in your community, in your environment, right? The things that you were exposed to, the people you were exposed to. And I'm hoping that I got some people that are over 40 on here, because like, I'm going to go with the fact that people over 40 have a different means. Even when things got violent, there was a different way to handle things back in the day. You know, growing up in the 60s and the 70s era, people learned to navigate problem resolution a little bit different. And then things started to shift just a little bit in the 80s, because child abuse laws and things like that came out and made it kind of difficult for folks to parent in the way that they had been accustomed to. And so as a result of that, they could engage, or felt like they could engage, their kids' behaviors in the ways that they previously did. We said it depends on who the disagreement is with. What if it's with a person that you're at a grocery store? Because if I'm going to talk about a recent event, what was it? Not even a week ago, a young Black male came into the store, not even far from me here in Atlanta. Okay, perfect. You're a perfect fit. Answer that question for me. But he came into that store, and there was something that he wanted to get out of the store. And he was denied getting that thing because he had something that was money. He had false money or something, fake money. I don't know. And he was denied, left the store, came right back in and shot and killed a young lady that was the cashier and the store manager and another innocent bystander that was here in Atlanta. Says, my suggestion is that all Black couples need a notebook of questions for one another before engaging in sexual intercourse. I think our situation in life is serious enough for that type of vetting. You know what? I agree, because like I'm Finnish American, and for me, that's a huge thing. That's a huge, but in culture is different. Coming and exploring American culture was very, 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 very different. I will say that. And people just simply didn't, they didn't date the same way. Their ideas around dating and vetting and courting and things like that were not the same. They're like, courting, vetting, what? That's inundated. But howdy, Dr. Jefferson. Thanks for being here. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for following. So the question that we're on right now is, how were you taught to handle disagreements, and where did you acquire the skills? So let's go back to I Am Retired. Let's go back to his answer to the question. And hers. What was, because I don't think I saw one when you said it depends on who it is. I learned on my own. So what's your method? Did you include your method in the comments yet? I am retired. I was raised by a single Black female. Okay. You didn't have any uncles or grandparents or anything? Like, you said that you were 50. 50 is the time. Grandparents are pretty prevalent then in the conditioning of young people. Well, it just depends on where you lived too in the United States. So, but what were her ideas around how you should handle yourself in the streets? Like if you had a disagreement with a person. Or did she have that conversation at all? Because I do get that a lot. People say, my parents never talked to me about sex. My parents never talked to me about, engaging in relationships, et cetera, et cetera. My parents never told me anything about, having breasts. Like, it's a lot of things that parents haven't been doing. Since my era, we yelled and hoped it died down. And if it did not die down, we had fist fights. After the fight was over, we made up and went on. Agreed. That's same here. Same here. Same here. But the interesting thing is that after you finish the fights, there was still no real resolution. And so there ended up being conversations, exchange of dialogue that, kind of, people were curious, why'd you get in the fight with so-and-so? They won the fight, blah, blah, blah. The fight, she taught me to fight, fist fight. So your grandparents, what did your grandfather have to say about what it meant for you to be a man, what it meant for you to go out and defend yourself, how you should conduct yourself outside of the family system? You said for that store encounter, if a person is hostile, I absolutely would not have stayed on the cashier line. I've worked in retail before. Oh, she didn't. She didn't. He came in and he hawked her down and he murdered her and the store manager and another person. Yeah, that was the other night. It's 3 nights ago, something like that. It's not far from us, but yeah. So, our community, and that's in our community. That's my biggest thing. Us. It's us. Like, what leads to these types of behaviors? My grandfather was a loving yet violent Army veteran. Oh, wow. That's a lot. What did he have to say about you becoming a man and what that meant? He went through the store, according to the customers that were, in there. went through the store. I think that's how the other person got killed, trying to intervene, like after he had, yeah. People are extremely, have you ever seen anybody on a, have a manic episode, how they become very goal oriented? That's how I describe the energy that these people who have decided to be violent as a means to solving issues of being embarrassed or being rejected and things like that. It's like it's a whole thing. So that's why I talk so much about the mental health component, to understanding the behaviors in our society, coming to a place where we understand what's actually seeding the types of behaviors that we naturally go back to. So at some point, right, we will be people who are young, who fight it out. And then when we move to another place of maturation, right? Because the thing is, the reality is this: we're going through various cycles of maturation over the course of a lifespan. So if we're properly attuning ourselves and developing through these different phases of life appropriately, what happens is we learn from our mistakes. We learn from the things that we've done as we were younger, and we become more evolved individuals as time evolves and our maturation evolves. And so we behave differently. We think differently on a more expanded level, because now we have completed that last phase of development and we're ready to move into this phase of development and learn life lessons here. So the problem that I have with the Black community, the problem that I have with us, is that we are so traumatized at these lesser, we call less important phases of development, because we don't cultivate our children as much as we should, because those are the integral moments for us to be doing that work as parents. And so we discredit that time of their development, and we do not help them through those phases of development, especially when they're traumatized because their parents aren't together. So those initial attachment traumas are at bay and responsible for not having adequate means of coping to the distress that presents when they're in elementary school. Those phases of development, after they have done that piece and they move into middle school, the next phase of development between the ages of 11, 14-ish, it's approaching the next identity crisis. They should have learned that the old ways of handling issues don't apply here, because we're older. Right? And we've learned things about human interaction, and we've learned things about problem resolution, and we've seen things play out negatively. We've had exposure to the world around us, and we see that people are dying. We see that people are behaving inadequately, and that's just not appropriate. Parents have sat us down and had conversations with us about how valuable we are as people and how we are larger than the issues that we are confronted with. Right? So therefore, we should not react in an emotional manner that would put us out of character as we're currently developing said character. So we move into the next phase of development. And as a result of learning that stuff, right, we now start to actually have conversations. The conversations will sometimes become very heated, though. Right? And so in this phase of development, because now we're teenagers, and we all know what that identity crisis phase looks like for teenagers between the ages of 14 and 17. Okay. So we see that life is not yielding what life should be yielding, or what we think it should be yielding. So we don't really know it all, as a result of us ending up in arguments over and over and over again with the people that we're tethered to in our communities. And we find ourselves just becoming more angry. So that teaches us that maybe we should be safe in our communication attempts, and we should be having these arguments in a more productive space. So now, as we move on to graduating high school and getting ready to go out into the world, we're actually prepared to learn the skills that will help us gauge hostility, emotionalism, distress management, and cope effectively. So by now, we're ready to go to therapy and get some business about ourselves, right? And so then you learn how to manage your anger and your hostility levels and not react with emotion, but react with a place of curiosity, so that we can understand what's really going on in these scenarios in our lives. And so as a result of that, we move into early adulthood with a more profound sense of self, a more secure sense of self, and a more effective means of communicating, conveying message of disappointments, and then receiving messages of disappointment and invalidation or rejection, right? You said, true, I didn't learn about minimizing conflict until I was in my mid-20s. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's just a phasal thing. That means that, or hopefully you went through those stages of development. But the thing is, when people do not develop fully through those other components that I named, all those different phases, right? What happens is they're stunted in their growth. So by the time they're ready to go through the next, they can't complete the next phase because it's like a prerequisite thing in college. If you didn't have the previous course, you can't take this course, right? And so that's kind of how that goes. But so let me go back and look at some of your comments because I didn't see them. Yeah, people are way more angry today. Guns and fist fighting. Joined the army because of him. Okay, interesting. Even though he was angry, he would not find me. She said, I will be gone 100%. The reality is, we do not think that people will do the things that they often do. I don't think anybody in that store intended to die that day. Okay. And I'm saying this because, like, I don't know why I have to keep expressing this to people that look like us. Black and brown people understand we have an issue in our community. We have more trust for ourselves and our irrational acts, right? Even though we continue to show, we continue to show that we are hostile, volatile with one another. For whatever reason, we feel like we discredit the capacity of things becoming something that is uncontrollable. Okay. We discredit the propensity of those things, becoming something of that magnitude. This was a disagreement, sent him out of the store. I think that after the hostility around the argument with the manager standing there trying to figure out, okay, well, what happened in the situation, blah, 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 he got caught up. The other person that was in the store got caught up, because people were not expecting for this guy, the young black dude, to come in here and just kill everybody. What are we doing? This was a grocery store. I have to make sure you guys understand that. It's a grocery store within a black community that is a disenfranchised community. And this grocery store is run by an Asian owner. Meant to put resources back into the community at a discounted rate so that the black community has everything that they need. But yeah, so then again, if he was determined, he would come back for the next day. Right. I don't even think that she expected him to come back in there. I think that people, all from the accounts of everybody that talked about it, I don't think they really were. I don't think that's what they were thinking. Let's see. He said, especially those 45 supporters. Agreed. But you know what? Let me tell you something. Although we've held, because I talked about that too when I talked about Dr. Umar Johnson stuff. So we hold the Trump supporters accountable, and we're really quick to talk about them. But the black community refuses to hold Umar's followers accountable. I don't understand that. So do we still have crack babies running around? That is a greater question. That guy that shot the cashier was probably born impaired. No, actually, that's what I'm saying. When we're looking at the people, and this is one of the things that really upset me. The person who attested to knowing the person, having grown up around the person, claims they don't know where the person can be found. You grew up with him. You don't know where his mom stayed though? Like, you know, there are just some things. I think that it's a parenting issue, because what I will say is that parents these days in our community are simply not parenting. Just not. A suggestion that I use today is no contact, no conflict. I suggested that Black people stay away from one another unless engaged in constructive activities. Activities like this are constructive. I totally agree. I feel like that's better. It's a more appropriate solution for what we're dealing with right now, because these people are just so off kilter. You understand what I'm saying? So, and I think it has a lot to do with, and I'm not blaming it on coronavirus or nothing like that, but it has a lot to do with the amount of isolation that was not necessarily selected. Isolation due to COVID. And the Black community has a natural resistance issue. Okay, the Black community is resistant to anything that we don't say ourselves. So if we don't say do it ourselves, and I mean individually, not collectively, if we didn't say do it, then we're not going to do it. Like, we're not going to do it. No, you're not going to tell me to stay in the house. You tell me to stay in the house. What's wrong with you? Who's doing that? I'm not doing that. And so you're a bad person for telling me to stay in the house. I'm going to do what I want to do. Tell me to not kill each other. Well, you know what? I'm going to buy a gun right now because I need to protect myself, because folks out here trying to get me. Whatever it is, we've always got an excuse as to why it is that we will not, refuse to comply. And that's just the craziest thing for me. I totally agree. But so that is the bulk of what I wanted to cover today. I definitely want you guys to go back and catch this thing and rewind it. If you've not already subscribed or whatever, then I would love for you guys to subscribe and help me meet my goal of 500 followers. But make sure that when you are doing your review, that you go all the way back to the very, very beginning, so that you can catch everything from the onset of this commentary. This conversation has been pretty expansive. So I've talked about a lot of things, and it all really leads to us adapting better patterns of behavior as we learn how to relate to one another in a healthy way. Just learning how to respect one another, learning how to coexist, learning how to understand that rejection is a part of our becoming, it's a part of our lives, and it's a part of everything that is in us. Literally, we have to have rejection to have healthy connections. If there are no rejections, then how can we lead ourselves to the person that we're destined to be with? How can we operate from a healthy perspective in life? So parents got to start being parents. People in the community have to start holding our own accountable, and we have to stop deflecting and pointing the finger at everybody else. Thanks a bunch. I appreciate you for subscribing. Make sure you share the content and all that great stuff. Awesome. Later days. Bye.
Who alive can't put me in a box. I redefine any definition you got. I am the tiger, I'm making steps to the top. The flames, I whip it up, you just gotta hand me the rock. Take a seat, you cannot stand it. All I know, the flow harder than a Scotch bonnet. Don't try better than me, you cannot manage. So if this ain't what you want, bitch, I'm a fucking phenomenon.